Oh, we'll be perfect. Perfect. I'll wait for you. Good evening. All right, good evening. A warm welcome to all our guests, students, staff, faculty. I'd like to welcome all of you to this year's edition of IMC Live with a question. It's not a tough question, it's an easy question. How many of you have seen the movie Air? I don't normally recommend movies, but if you haven't, I strongly recommend you watching this movie, even if you're not a sports fan, or for that matter, a shoes fan or a basketball fan. The success of the Air Jordan brand lies not just in its cutting-edge design, but in its ability to transcend the basketball court, resonating globally with diverse audiences who see a pair of Air Jordans not just as footwear, but as a cultural symbol of aspiration and self-expression. By recognizing and embracing the diverse narratives surrounding Air Jordans, we understand the power of weaving cultural richness and inclusive storytelling into IMC strategies, ensuring that our messages become not just advertisements, but resonant stories that connect with the hearts and minds of a varied global audience. As we gather here today to discuss the impact of culture and inclusion on marketing, it is important to note at the heart of Medill's IMC philosophy is the recognition that effective marketing is a dynamic interplay of deep cultural insights and powerful storytelling that shapes experiences. In the Medill IMC framework, understanding the cultural fabric in which a brand operates is a foundational element of a firm's marketing and communication strategy. By acknowledging the intricate nuances of diverse communities, marketers are equipped to craft narratives that resonate authentically with their target audiences, fostering loyalty and even driving advocacy. In fact, even digital platforms like TikTok, Airbnb, and Netflix have been immensely successful because of their ability to use data to cover insights on the cultural experiences that we seek as individuals and as a society. At Medill IMC, we also recognize that true innovation in marketing arises when diverse voices are not only heard, but actively incorporated into the creative process. From campaign ideation to execution, it is important to place an emphasis on inclusion so that DEI initiatives are baked in and not just bolted on to a marketing strategy. At the same time, marketing leaders today face immense challenges in communicating the values of their brand to various stakeholders, as we can see today. Brands find themselves in moments of crisis that they may never have anticipated. While the theme for this year's IMC Live, the impact of culture and inclusion in marketing, was crafted months ago, it looks like this will be an important topic for marketing leaders for years to come. Today, let us draw inspiration from our accomplished guests as we explore how culture and inclusion can shape not only marketing strategies, but also the very essence of how brands connect with their audiences in a highly connected digital world. With that, I would like to welcome Professor Daniel Robinson Bell to lead what I know is going to be an engaging and enriching conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Vijay. Hi, everyone. Hi. Welcome. I was going to say a few words about culture and inclusion and IMC, but Vijay, I cannot, who can compete with that? Thank you for that. And it truly encompasses what we want to accomplish here tonight. Fun fact, true story, and I'm going to try to get through this night without getting too emotional, but this is now my 4th year here at Medill, and one of the first conversations I had when I joined was with Vijay and this idea around culture and inclusion, multicultural marketing, and a course did not exist in the IMC curriculum that addressed that topic. And so I was tasked with bringing a course like that to life, and I did, and it is my pride and joy and baby, and some of my students are here, and some of my students are also on the live stream. Hello. And so this event is truly near and dear to me, so thank you all for being here. I'm going to get right into a few introductions, and then we'll get into our discussions. I want to introduce all of our wonderful guests up front so that the rest of the evening will flow. As Vijay mentioned, I am Danielle Bell. I'm an assistant director at IMC. I teach in strategic communications as well as culture and inclusion and marketing. I'm also the director of the IMC Professional Master's Program. And because I'm also old, I'm going to put my glasses on. Allow me to introduce our guests for the evening. Tonight we have joining us Marc Wilson. He is the EVP, Executive Director of Strategic Inclusion at FCB, Foot Conan Belding, a global ad agency located right here in Chicago. In his role, Marc is responsible for all diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within FCB as they relate across the workforce, the workplace, and creative output of the agency. Marc believes that understanding people and uncovering their motivations is at the heart of connecting brands with consumers And an ad agency veteran of over 15 years, Marc has led and played an integral role in the strategic planning discipline at full-service global agencies like, obviously, FCB, McGarry Bowen, LatinWorks, Havas, and RGA. Recently, Marc was humbled to be recognized as one of Campaign Magazine's 40 over 40 honorees, as well as to receive the publication's DEI Advocate of the Year award. Marc received his bachelor's from Duke University, where he double majored in psychology and sociology, his master's degree in psychology from Pepperdine University, and a doctorate in business psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. When he's not at work or on a golf course somewhere, Marc finds his greatest joy spending time with his wife, Kelsey, 2 kids, Isaac and Shepherd, and their 130-pound bull mastiff, Deacon. Welcome, Marc. Before Marc takes the stage, please join me in welcoming Medill alumna Elisa Schmitz and Mary Dillon, President and CEO of Foot Locker, Inc. I'll start with Elisa. She is an award-winning Latina entrepreneur, journalist, and author. She is the founder and CEO of 30seconds.com, an inspiring digital media platform with millions of unique users every month. She is also the founder of iParenting, a best-of-the-web digital media company that was acquired by the Walt Disney Company. She is the author of the highly acclaimed book, Become the Fire, Transform Life's Chaos into Business and Personal Success. And she lives right here in the Chicago area. Welcome back, Lisa. And now it is my esteemed honor to introduce to you Mary Dillon, the President and Chief Executive Officer and Board Director of Foot Locker, Inc., a leading footwear and apparel retailer with $8 billion in revenue, approximately 2,600 retail stores, and 50,000 team members in 26 countries. In 2023, Mary launched Foot Locker's Lace Up Plan, a strategy designed to drive the organization's next phase of growth and create value for all company stakeholders with a focus on expanding sneaker culture, powering up the portfolio, deepening relationships with customers, and offering up best-in-class omni-channel distribution. Lace Up is set to position the organization's success for the next 50 years and beyond. Foot Locker has pledged $200 million in its leading education and economic development initiative to invest in, amplify, and empower the Black community. At the Foot Locker Foundation, the focus is on advancing equity through education, economic development, and community engagement. Mary serves as an independent director of KKR & Company, Inc., the global investment company. She and her husband of 38 years, Terry, have 4 adult children, and the family enjoys adventure travel, tennis, and pickleball. Mary, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Medill. Come on up and take it away, ladies.
I try to be equally fair.
Click it.
Try to be equally fair across tennis and pickle, because I know some people take a stand on that. Maybe not here.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I am overjoyed to be here with you tonight, especially because we have Mary Dillon, the most amazing person that I know, actually, here with us tonight. Most of you know who Mary is, especially after that great introduction, and why she's such a rock star. But for those of you who don't, let me share a bit about what I think makes Mary so amazing. Mary is not only the president and CEO of Foot Locker and the former CEO of Ulta Beauty. She's also been an angel investor in my company, 30seconds.com, and she wrote the foreword for my book, Become the Fire. Mary recently made history by becoming only the 3rd woman to ever run 2 Fortune 500 companies. Currently, just 52 companies out of 500 are led by female CEOs. A self-made success story from the south side of Chicago, Mary worked her way through school as a first-generation college student, Then she rose through the ranks at PepsiCo and McDonald's before landing her first CEO job at US Cellular. As CEO of Ulta Beauty, she catapulted its growth while building a culture of respect and diversity. Now at Foot Locker, she's reinvigorating the brand and positioning it for massive digital expansion. Just last week, Mary and Foot Locker launched the Heart of Sneakers platform to celebrate sneaker culture. I saw this in action at the Foot Locker store at the nearby Lincolnwood Mall, where I bought several new pair of sneakers, including these vintage Air Jordan retros in Northwestern purple.
So perfect.
I know Mary has a video, so at whatever point you want to show that about the Heart of Sneakers, we'd love to show that to you guys. So with Mary as a role model, I'm reminded that being a CEO is not just about wrangling numbers on a spreadsheet or managing marketplace disruptions. Being a CEO is about people and culture. Good leaders know how to engage employees and motivate diverse teams, which is why great CEOs put their people first and provide runway for them to grow. The best CEOs empower others and create a culture where they can thrive. And that's what leadership is all about. So thank you, Mary, for inspiring me and so many others. Now, Mary has kindly agreed to share her thoughts on a few key topics related to culture, inclusion, and impact in marketing.
Before we start, can I just mention that today we announced a multi-year partnership between Foot Locker and the NBA.
Oh my God.
So I'm super excited. I mean, you can imagine there's always, some people are like, yeah, of course, aren't you already? You know, we actually, there's a strong relationship between between Foot Locker and basketball, but we haven't actually really been activating this arena for a while. In fact, marketing was kind of looked at as a cost center, not a lever for growth before I got there the last several years. So I'm bringing it back. Bringing the heat. And I'm just saying, you watch. People are going to be talking more about Foot Locker, hopefully shopping there more too. So I'm counting on you guys.
Okay, that is awesome. That is great news. Okay.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. So Mary, let's start the conversation by talking about culture competency. You're known for your leadership at brands we all know and love. When it comes to your career, words like transformation and change agent come to mind. But let's talk about you as the culture creator. At Ulta, you led more than 90% of female associates on your team. And now at Foot Locker, a culture of diversity, inclusion, and respect continues to be a key to your leadership. Tell us why you're intentional about centering culture in your work, and why is this important to you personally and to Foot Locker?
Yeah, we could take a few hours on that topic. There's kind of a personal side of this, which maybe I'll come back to, but the business side, especially because you all are in this program learning about consumer-driven businesses and marketing strategies and communication strategies. So I grew up in consumer packaged goods initially, and really having a keen focus on understanding who your consumer target is, deeply understanding everything you can about them, and building a proposition around them is what it's about, okay? So at the end of the day, when you look at, especially in the US, but globally, you know, we operate in a world that is diverse by definition, is becoming more diverse every day. So having a culture of inclusion shouldn't even be a question, both through the lens of how we think about our employees, from the storeroom to the boardroom, I like to say, as well as how we think about all of our marketing strategies. But it's been surprising to me how slow the world has been to get there. And just as an anecdote, when I started to run Ulta Beauty, that's the first retail company I'd ever run. So that was like taking a risk on putting somebody like me in there. And this was in 2013. When most people had not heard of it. It was like Ulta, Ultra, what's that, right? Like nobody knew what it was. But what's interesting is that I'd come from consumer packaged goods, where I think we had been doing a good art and science, like discipline around understanding the mindset of people as well as the demographics, right? And thinking about mindset first, and then demographics come along. But anyway, so I get into the beauty industry, and I'll never forget, we were opening up a store in Hyde Park in my first year, and I was like super excited, like, hey, this is really awesome because, you know, I'm from Chicago. It made me really proud to think about opening up more stores in Chicago, particularly on the south side. I go to the store about a week before we're about to open it, and I see all the photos, and I was pretty new, and I wasn't micromanaging everything. I see all the photos in the windows. They were all white, blonde women. Now, with all due respect, I do have a daughter. I have 4 kids. One of them has to be blonde. But I mean, but every picture, and then I go in the store, and it was the first time the epiphany hit me that this industry doesn't understand that we operate in a multicultural world in the U.S., and it's only going to become more so. That's not rocket science, right? So I just remember thinking, I'm really glad I didn't hold a press conference that day, because I think I would have looked kind of stupid, frankly. And I really then went back and kind of rethought and rewired and asked our marketing team to think about, how do we show up inclusive everywhere? We can't control what every beauty brand is doing. We can control what we do. So reflective of our employees, reflective of our customers. But even that took a while, because I think at first the team thought, well, we can do these kinds of, pictures in the Southwest and these kind of things. And that's hard to execute. Well, here's what's not hard. Just show up diverse everywhere, because the country is diverse and getting more so. And so I will never forget the first time that I had an employee who ran one of our salons say to me, she looked up at a picture of one of our styles for the season, and she goes, this is the first time in 8 years I've seen somebody that looks like me, and I really appreciate that. And I really think that was a catalyst for the company, like the way customers viewed us as well. So now there's a long story on that, sorry. But I would say I come to Foot Locker and am similarly surprised, and that the diversity of the company is much greater. I guess I'm not surprised, but we're really proud about the fact that in the US alone, like 92% of our store employees are Black or Hispanic. But as you go up the ranks, of course, it was not so much. And so in a year I was able to really, 60% of my leadership team is either gender or racially diverse, 80% of our board, and that, with world-class talent. So I think that's just, I feel really strongly that it's just a given, it's critical, and we can do this. It's not hard.
100%. That's fantastic. How would you say, Mary, a leader gains or can improve on their culture competency? If people want to expand that, what seems to you to be kind of a natural thing might not come naturally to everybody.
Yes, I would say, and I know that. Like, I'd say a really simple tip is that trying to have empathy for different people's roles in the company, and at a minimum, treating everybody with respect. And it's like in a retail company, we have thousands of people that work for us, whether it was Ulta Beauty or Foot Locker, and the vast majority of the employees are in the stores. And it's kind of like, I can remember being a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old. I've had every job, because as you said, I put myself through college, so I waitressed, I worked at drugstores, I cleaned apartments, I tutored. I did a lot of stuff. And so I thought that's what everybody did at the time. I didn't know. But anyways, it's not hard for me to project myself in when I started in retail at Ulta Beauty, thinking, I bet people here, because I used to stock, CoverGirl in the drugstore. I'm sure people have thoughts and ideas about things that are working well and things that aren't working well. And it was surprising that maybe nobody's asking that. And so when you create a culture where you just, you can't solve every single thing, but when you bring people together, this is what I do and I teach my leaders to do, and simply have open discussion about what's working and what's not, how can we get better. You maybe pick 1 or 2 things that you can improve on, and then that becomes infectious in the company, because people feel heard and seen and respected, and it builds a sense of nobody's afraid to speak truth to power, and things just, it really helps the momentum in terms of making things happen, and I think our customers feel that too.
That's amazing and so insightful, and I want to go back to a word that you used, which I think is so important, which is empathy. I think that's probably one of the greatest leadership traits that flies under the radar.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about empathy and why that's so important?
Yeah, it's not like, and empathy is not like sympathy. It's not like, it's just like understanding, trying to put yourself in the shoes. And again, I think I learned a lot when I started in brand management at Quaker Oats in 1983, when it was this independent company here in Chicago. And you learn as a marketer, you have to understand and have insights about your guests, your customer, even if they're not you. So when I was running at one point different businesses, like a snack business, and then I was running a pet food business. And at the time, I was not a dog owner. In fact, I did not grow up with dogs, right? So I had to think like the mindset of somebody in this segment that we cater to the people who would serve this food. It was called Kibbles and Bits. The whole driver, what happens in the industry, has to do with your relationship with your dog. Are you look at your dog as a friend? Is your dog kind of like an outdoor dog? Is your dog like your child, or is your dog like your grandchild? So anyways, this product happened to be more in that child-grandchild part of the continuum, as you can imagine. And so I could just use things think about myself as a mother at that time. created this Good Doggy Club to celebrate the dog's birthday. I mean, simple things, but like projecting, that's a way to just have empathy, even if you're not the consumer target, I guess I would say. But more, I think, when I think about leading people, it's really about also giving people a benefit of the doubt that they're smart, they're part of the business, they're business owners. And so, for example, when we have a group of people, say from the field, all of our district managers or store managers, the first time I did this at Ulta, we had the leadership team up and nobody was asking questions. It was supposed to be Q&A, but nobody's asking questions. So I was like, that's interesting. And then when they did, I noticed that the people on the stage were pretty likely to kind of explain to them why that couldn't be done or why that, sorry, I keep dropping this. It was kind of like sometimes the more senior you get in a company, the more you're expected to have all the answers. Instead, what we did is flip it, because usually when somebody's asking a question, it's because they know the answer or they have a point of view already, and they just don't. So if you just say, well, tell me more, why are you asking that? Or sometimes I'll be like, well, give my answer, but hey, what do you think? What would you add? Just doing that kind of dialogue with people, I think it shows some connection and empathy and truly just get better outcomes.
Absolutely. And again, you just said something so important, which is, when a leader says to an employee, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah.
It's so empowering. It's, they almost, you care what I think. I mean, that just.
And I don't do it like as a gotcha at all. I mean, I genuinely, again, because I can project to my younger self and having a point of view, either being afraid to state it or maybe nobody asked me. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things when you ask about culture and I think it naturally helps to build inclusion, because I do that with everybody. I'm not picking a level or a type of employee. It's really everybody.
That's awesome. We could talk about that forever, I think, but I'm going to move on to our next question. Let's talk about leadership. As one of just 3 women to lead 2 Fortune 500 companies, and as CEO of a brand in a category historically dominated by men, your success is a blueprint for many, as the first, the only, or one of just a few. What has guided your leadership in spaces that depend on you, but don't necessarily reflect your identity or your lived experience?
That's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. Well, first of all, yes, some people say it's pretty cool that I'm running another company. It's a third-time CEO. Some people might say, "What are you, nuts?" Yeah. It's pretty hard, I mean, but I do feel like I kind of came in off the bench after I retired. I really created an amazing leadership team at Ulta and was ready to hand over the reins. And I didn't think I was going to run another public company. And then, I realized I really missed it, and I missed trying to figure out a way that I can help make a company better and make the culture better. So it's easy for me to say I'm not daunted by coming into places that are not reflective of me. But in some ways, I'll tell you, at this stage of the game, it still happens to me in ways that, how do I say this? It's almost helpful because I can still understand that there's situations that we walk into if we're not the majority where we have to still work at it, if that makes sense. So it could be everything from being in line in global services, waiting for a plane, and 5 men walk in front of me thinking I'm not global. I'm like, I am global. I'm here for, anyway, sorry. But I mean, there's this, I'm stating the obvious. There's just like unconscious bias. And when I came into this industry, I went to, my first big meeting was with Adidas in Germany, and they had all the retailers from around the world. And I walked in the room and I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I am the oldest. I am one of, maybe there's 2-3% women in the room, and also not very many Americans. The only thing that really saved me on this, you guys, is that because I was new to the industry, but they had like little things you could sign up for that were sports related, and so I learned how to play this game called Medill in Spain from my daughter-in-law, and it's sort of a version of a paddle sport. Anyway, so that was one of the things you could do. So I signed up for it, and I go there and I look, and like there's just all these like really former like football, soccer type 40-year-old guys. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? So I wasn't going to play. But then the person running was like, no, come on out and play. And so I could hold my own like enough, but I could tell being the only American on the court, the only woman, and by far the oldest, like it was like a badge of honor. But I joke about it, but I'm thinking to myself, at this stage of the game, I still need something like that to feel like I fit in here. Do you see what I mean? So in some ways, I don't mean to sound pessimistic about it, but I do like to continue to prove that, anything is possible. It doesn't daunt me anymore at this stage of my game, but the fact that I still feel it gives me more empathy for what I think we all need to do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That was a long-winded answer to your question, but if anybody...
I totally got it. I was right
Okay.
there with you, totally
It came in
understood.
handy is all I can say.
Yes, we all have those experiences, and I, it kind of heartens me that someone at your level continues to have these experiences because, it just shows it happens to everybody,
Well, in
right?
some ways, it's kind of a gift in that it gives me a lot of conviction about continuing to create inclusive environments, right? So when
Yeah.
you started to ask about leadership, when I build a leadership team, I look for like 3 traits. There's a foundation of respect, just not surprising, like respecting of everybody that works in the company. And so that's the foundation. But then on top of it, I look for people that have equal parts functional expertise. So if you're reporting to the CEO, whether you're in supply chain or whether you're in marketing or finance, I expect that person to be top of their game because either it's not an expertise I have or I don't have time to teach somebody, And then I expect them to be able to get out of their functional silo and have great enterprise skills, enterprise thinking. So sometimes understanding that it's not all about what we're going to do for supply chain or what we're going to do for marketing. You have to think about the broader. And the third is collaboration. So people who really believe in and value the power of working together to come up with the best solutions. But that combined with people that bring diverse life experiences, to me, is what makes a really magical team.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That I think, and I'm going to blow the stat right now because I can't think of it, but it's proven through research that teams with more diversity actually yield higher business results. So I'm sure that you have
Absolutely.
experienced that as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
What are your leadership values? And maybe you already you talked a little bit about that. And how do you live those values as a leader and as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I did kind of explain some of the values, or they're sort of leadership principles, I guess I would say. And what I try to do is, select the right leadership team first and foremost. And, it's not like I come into a place and I'm like, I just bring a posse with me, like out with the old, in with the new, nothing like that. In fact, it's much better if people in the company, if we could all if it could all work right from the start because they have the expertise of the industry and the company. But usually I've found that there's kind of a combination of folks that, like my team today, some have been with Foot Locker a long time, others that I needed to bring in with certain areas of expertise. But getting that team in place and making sure that they share my values about the things we talked about, listening, about empathy, about creating a culture of respect. So then they, as they hire people, you've got to find ways to amplify the culture. But then I put other systemic things in place. So, whether it's how we bring people together X times a year, as a collective body to talk about not just the business, but about culture, whether it's training and development programs that I put in place for people at various levels so that we continue to inculcate the values and the culture. So that even projects where I bring people together from different parts of the company to work as a collaborative team so they can see what that is like. Sometimes in your career you're still learning your function, so you're maybe not on big enterprise projects, but I sort of just create those so people can learn what that's like to be in a team where you're working on something together.
I love that. Okay. Moving on to the
Yes.
next question. Let's talk about being data-driven yet human-inspired. Beauty and footwear are deeply connected to consumer culture, and data and analytics are key to the decisions you make every day. A great example is your current The Heart of Sneakers campaign, where you're creating experiences by leveraging the authentic connection to sneaker culture via your stripers, or store employees who are the connection between sneakers and the sneaker passionate, which I love that, by the way. So the question is, how do you get it right? Meaning, how do you deliver on an experience that resonates with the customer and drives the business forward?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is the fun part. And I think that Dean alluded to this at the beginning with his opening comments about, it's almost like I'm not a professor, so I'll probably screw this up, but whatever. But I think about it in a couple ways. One is that there's kind of like this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? From the more functional all the way up to the self-actualized and emotional. And I think about many businesses, there's both kind of like a physical reason for being, and you've got to have a really great, whether it's an experience or a product that's differentiated and compelling. But then there really needs to be an emotional place that your brand lives. Again, this is what you guys do at FCB, this is what we do. And if you can find that sweet spot, and build everything around that, and if it has to be authentic and compelling. So, in the case of Ulta Beauty, one of the things that we discovered is that people were needing to think about beauty in a way that wasn't really just about the exterior. It's really about how does everybody unleash the power, the possibility of their own beauty in both very specific personal ways. Again, that's where diversity also really matters. There's nothing, beauty is one of the categories that is most often tied to your physical, whether it's your hair type, whether it's your skin type, whether it's your skin color, right? It's very critical to get that right. But then the emotional place that Ulta Beauty lives is really much more in the opening up the possibilities in a really positive way. And it flows through everything, marketing, store teams. And if you go into an Ulta Beauty, and I'm not bashing the competition, but if you go into a Sephora, they're very different vibes that people would describe in that experience. And so at Foot Locker, one of the things that was pretty clear to me when I got there is that we call our team members stripers. Of course, everybody, the iconic striped jersey. And I was happy to see that the culture of the company already, I'd say, really celebrates the striper. Okay, so that's good. And we've got a lot of employees that have been with the company for a long time. And I think one of our key roles is job creation, often in places where there aren't that many jobs. The young people who work for us, it's really fun because it's a fun category. Just like in beauty, we attract people who love beauty. We attract people who love sneakers. Beauty, everybody loves the store discount. Same thing with our team. But they also, and they often go on to have careers throughout the company, right? Whether it's in field positions or in corporate. And so the notion of how do we unleash that and celebrate it is important, but I didn't want to do it until I was confident that we were doing the right things by our stripers in terms of, so I made a big investment in wages, which we were under where we needed to be, frankly, and I made a big investment in training, development, and technology to make the job easier and more fun. But anyway, so what you're going to see now is, I've learned now that I'm in this category that something about being part of sneaker culture, we have to be careful not to make it exclusive because it can be a little bit like too cool for school. The people who really, really know are like, but we're trying to do it in a way that everybody can feel included. And when you have on a pair of sneakers, just you're experiencing this.
Yes.
People look at you differently. And it's like it's this way to connect with people, and it makes you feel cooler and younger and part of something. And it's really cool. And I think, to me, the big growth strategy is unleashing, like if you could imagine replacing all your heels with sneakers for every occasion, how much growth is that? And you can't, right? That's what I'm doing. So that's the campaign, and maybe we'll show this now. This is just one execution. So what we're trying to do is celebrate sneaker culture, connection to popular culture, connection to basketball. This is just one execution, so it's kind of hard to get a flavor of it. I think this is the one with LaMelo Ball. But yes. The idea here is that you're going to see our stripers are like they're like an entourage and a hype crew, but they're going to be the ones that are hyping everyday people, not the athletes. Anyways, you'll see. Let's show one. But go check out the rest on social.
Yo, where you at? I need your help with something.
We pulling up right now.
Need someone to hype me up. Hype me up. Need someone to hype me up. Hype me up. Hype me up. Need someone to hype me up. Hype me up. Need someone to hype me up.
Mello, we got you, man.
That's hype.
That's awesome.
You'll see several other executions of that. All right, so
That was awesome. And actually, that one of my questions, which you just answered basically, is how the stripers how are they part of the brand culture? And I think it just got demonstrated. I mean, I love the fact that the stripers are part of the ad, that the marketing.
Oh yeah, you'll see a lot more. So a lot more.
So
coming.
cool,
Yeah.
so cool. And you also mentioned something that was another one of my questions, which is how do you know when the effort is inclusive without being exclusionary? And I think that you hit on that as well, Mary. But
Yeah.
anything else to add about trying not to be exclusionary?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. I guess it's a fine line, but we're really just trying to democratize sneakers and really make, because whether you're somebody who's looking at sneakers for sports or for fashion, there's a lot of different aspects of it. We're really trying to grow with women a lot more. Right now, our brand has been more associated with men, but that will be changing as well. So.
Wow.
Being more inclusive means bigger business. So that's good too, right?
Absolutely.
For
I
everybody.
have to just tell you one little funny story about my shoes because I love the shoes. These are actually not women's, they're youth.
Oh, they're youth, yeah. Well, that's a secret hack. If you have a small enough shoe size, ladies, yeah, and then they're a little less expensive.
I had no idea. But I'm like, I must have those shoes. And like, well, they're youth shoes. I'm like, well, can I fit in them? I'm like, sure. Yeah. So I did. So they
Good
fit
for
and they
you.
feel great. Anyway, so just a
for you.
little, yeah. Okay, so my last card.
Yes. Okay.
Let's talk about the future. As we conclude, what can we expect from Foot Locker in the near future? And I
Yeah,
think
well,
you
some
already
of this
tipped
I've
your hand.
alluded to, but I mean, all joking aside about all of this, when I came into the company, you know, you learn a lot once you get in. I realized that there was a lot of work to do. In that, I feel like we weren't investing in the company in the ways that I think to be a modern retailer you need to do. So it took me some number of months to step back and sort out where we were, then put together a plan, go to the street, and communicate the plan. Unfortunately, we've had to take our numbers down twice. And as a CEO, that is not fun, okay? But that's okay. Like, I'm a big girl wearing my big girl jacket. I mean, I could do this because it was the right thing to do. But I think now we're in a mode where we're going to continue to, like, start really delivering. But it's about the basics, like investing in our stores, so getting more of the fleet off mall, new concepts. We just opened up something called a House of Play in Chatham on Saturday, and Scottie Pippen came with
I
me to
saw
open
that
it.
on your Instagram, Mary.
So,
That
I
was
mean, you
pretty
know,
cool.
but we're trying to do new concepts off mall and invest in refreshing the stores, getting much more savvy at digital. The company was pretty behind. We're operating off a pretty old, just IT infrastructure, but we're not waiting. We're fixing that, but also on top of it, you know, very rapidly changing. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit about kind of the whole e-commerce experience, and it's fun to have these agile pod teams working together across tech and marketing, making improvements. So we're seeing really strong improvements on digital, on e-commerce, but we're just getting started, is what I would say. We're also investing in the brand, which we haven't done for a long time. So lots to come.
That's very exciting. And what can we expect from you as the CEO and the culture creator?
Well, I think what you're seeing. I mean, I'm telling you, I think people feel included and excited to be celebrated, and I'm just really trying hard to get to as many corners of the world. I mean, we're global, but it's kind of cool that there is a global unification around our stripers and the ethos of being a striper. So I've been in Europe, I've been in Asia, and spending time with folks around these same principles. And for the first time ever, we've had a really global campaign, and that's really bringing people together, too.
That's awesome. I have to tell you just one last note before my final question, which is that being in the store was very fun. There's a very good like energy, and the stripers were having a good time, and we just,
Well,
anyone would tell you that.
we're working on our store of the future, which would be a really refreshed look at how we do everything. And I've told my team I want the store of the now, because we're not waiting 5 years for this. But one of the things that's going to be a key hallmark of it is something we call the Kick It Club. So in the center of the store will be the try-on experience. You know, like a lot of times you're trying on shoes and you're trying to find a place to do it.
Yeah.
But actually, when you try on shoes and you get the hype from our stripers, like, oh, those look really good or those don't.
Right.
Listen, even when I'm in the store and I'm buying something, people are like, no, this is what you need, not this, right? So, I mean, our team has a point of view, but we're going to make that a more communal, fun, celebratory experience. We're going to call it the Kick It Club.
I like that. Okay, very good. Well, finally, we want to talk about the students in the room here. Many of them will be graduating with their master's in integrated marketing communications in just a few weeks. So, congratulations. So, Mary, what would you expect from them as early career marketers, and what would be your best advice?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, as I was saying to the dean of the school earlier, there has never been a time that the being savvy and sensitive and strategic about the intersection of the world we operate in, consumer insights and communication, I can't think of a time it's been more important. And there is no playbook. I'm trying to figure out every day right now. I'm not even kidding you. So I think I think what you're learning and the way you're learning it is super smart. So, you know, I'd say this. Maybe the best advice I can give is when you're new in a company or starting in your career, most of you have worked already, I'm sure, but you know, there's this combination, it's a fine line between exhibiting confidence and humility, because you do come into a place, you know a lot, you've learned a lot, and people want to hear your point of view. But anytime you're new, you also have to be humble and be like, okay, I know I have stuff to learn. How do I learn from my peers? How do I pick up cues on how the culture works here, because it's going to be a balancing act is the best way I can put it. But I think, being confident to show you have a point of view, to ask questions, to have the courage to maybe ask a question, you're like, maybe this isn't the best question, but it's nagging at me. Many times that's when people who are more senior at a company, like, oh, that person's really thinking ahead. They're thinking a couple steps ahead, or they're not afraid to ask a question, and those things actually break through, I think. So that's my advice.
Love it. All right, guys. Well,
And good
thank
luck
you
to
so
everybody.
much, Mary. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so fun. Thank you.
All right. Let's see, where is Jeff? All right. Give us 1 second as our next guest takes the stage and we'll get them all set up. Here we go. I think we're ready. We're ready. So do you want to use your handheld? Is this? That's not, that's, yeah. All right.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Hey, everyone. How you doing? First of all, extremely humbled and honored to be able to follow Mary. She is incredible, a pathfinder, and truly impressive. So it's great to be here. So let me just start. 2020. So Danielle told you a little bit about how I kind of got into the agency. And just to give you a little bit more historical kind of context and background. 3 years ago, we all kind of know what was happening in our country. 3.5 years ago. George Floyd was happening, right? That happened. The murder happened. At that time, a lot of agencies, a lot of marketing firms are trying to beef up their DEI creds, right? We need to start getting more diverse people in here. We need to kind of review our diverse strategy, or we need a chief diversity officer, whatever it was, they were kind of clamoring to do that kind of work. Not only that, they wanted to make sure that the work that they were putting out in the world was more inclusive. Got it. When I came to FCB 3 years ago, they said, Mark, can you come in and help us do that? I said, great. It seems like you're already on the right foot. Your commitment, you're ready to go, let's go. But in order to do this, we need to start interrogating the status quo. What are some ideas, some old constructs, terms that are really keeping us from doing truly inclusive work? Well, here's one of them. You guys know this term? General market? Raise your hand. Who's used this? Who's heard it? Good, very few hands. We gotta get rid of this term, y'all. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't exist if it ever has, right? And I've been in marketing for many years, and I know that the quiet, secret shorthand for general market is white, right? You have general market, and you have others, right? General market, POCs. It's exclusionary in nature. It doesn't work that way. Not only that, if you even look at where the demographics of this country are going, we're getting much, much more diverse. This is a misnomer. So if you start talking about general market versus POCs, what you do is you start siphoning off where the influence comes from. You're saying, you know what, we're not going to talk about POCs until it's time to do the POC work. We're going to do our mainline, mainstream general market work. You're not really to access the beauty and the culture that the others, quote unquote, can bring. So that term, kicking it to the curb, right? This is what we use at FCB. Diverse mass. To us, this better represents not only who we are as a country, as a culture, as a society, but where we're going, right? It really represents the myriad of different races, ethnicities, lifestyles, cultures, sexual identities, you name it. That's who we are as a country, so let's embrace it. So the term diverse mass is what we've adopted, and honestly, our client partners, our brand partners, we try to kind of incorporate that into their marketing teams, and we're making some headway. But again, this is how we start to kind of change the terminology to make sure we're intentional about doing this work the right way. So understanding diverse mass is also understanding those that fuel it. They're not a monolith, right? They're not all the same. Every black person isn't the same. Every Latino isn't the same. Everyone from the Asian community isn't the same. Everyone from the LGBTQ plus community isn't the same. There's nuance, there's variance, right? If I said, okay, I'm gonna talk to a Mexican-American born and raised in South Central LA, I have to understand that there's significant cultural nuances and differences from a Cuban-American born and raised in Miami versus a Puerto Rican-American born and raised in Brooklyn. It's not the same. I can say that about the black community, the Asian community, the LGBTQ plus community. You can't just cast a wide umbrella and say, you know what, I'm talking to everybody, because it doesn't work that way. There's intersectionality, right? You can occupy 1, 2, 3, 4 identities at once. There's fluidity between identities. I love this stat. One of my favorite stats. 276% increase in people identifying as more than one race, or 2 or more races, sorry, in this last census. That's huge. That's huge. Bless you. Because what we're seeing is people are starting to lean into the different dimensions of who they are. Demographics are confines that are just made up. We can't start to look at demographics and start to say, we know this category, we know these people, because we're much more dynamic than that, right? So it's also good to understand who they are because we look at culture, we look at influence. I said this in the first slide. Culture is fueled by the influence of those who support the diverse mass. This is just one slide. I could put dozens up there, but I see a lot of smiles because you recognize them, folks, right? Culture is absolutely fueled by the diversity within the diverse mass. Music, fashion, beauty, cinema, right? Bad Bunny. Y'all know Bad Bunny, right? I don't know what he's saying. I don't know what that brother is saying. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Because there's something about it that's pervasive that we're all kind of moving to because it moves us. We're all humans, right? BTS, same thing. Beauty, fashion, Lupita Nyong'o, right? Y'all know who she is? Dark, black-skinned woman, right? Let's be honest. Not necessarily the beacon of beauty historically in the United States. This hasn't been. Lancome Beauty Supply, Vogue doubled down on her saying, listen, this is our ambassador. This is what beauty looks like. Get used to it, right? We have Valentina Sampaio, the first transgender Sports Illustrated cover model. Madeline Stewart, supermodel with Down syndrome. We're starting to look at what does beauty look like now, right? People are leaning into that. Also, sometimes to the point where there may be some misappropriation. We get that, there's a problem there, but we see there's something about these cultures that people want. Cinema, Coda, award-winning, Academy Award-winning movie about a hearing-impaired family, right? Shang-Chi, first Asian-American superhero, huge. Encanto, remember that song, We Don't Talk About Bruno? Is it? Lord have mercy, my kids played that ad nauseum. But the point is, it goes on and on. That's where influence is coming from. We need to recognize that. So the question remains, how do we begin to tap into this influence of these unique, involving populations, right? How do we start to tap into that? Because we know that they're running culture. And we know brands want to connect with culture. Culture moves business. So how do we start to do this in an intentional way? With FCB, our point of view is upstream inclusion. That's how you do it. It's exactly as it sounds. It's actually bringing those tastes, those attitudes, those preferences, those behaviors, those values of those underneath, fueling the diverse mass, to the table upstream, right? When you're thinking about what's my marketing strategy? What's my creative brief? What's my creative campaign? Not later, right? I mentioned someone said something about retrofit, afterthought. We can't do that. Because what happens is it becomes disjointed. If you don't see their DNA in the absolute foundation of the strategic premise, when it's time to do, okay, let's go do the black work. Let's go do the Asian work. Well, it's going to be disjointed because they weren't considered at the outset. So if you do this, at the very least, you're going to be inclusive. People are going to start to see themselves in the work. Say, you know what? I see I was considered during this. It makes sense. I get it, at the very least. But at the very best, what I love about this approach is you're actually able to lean into the influence and the richness that those cultures bring to the diverse mass and do more provocative, unexpected work. Because certain communities start to represent certain ideas, certain behaviors, certain values that are aspirational, that connect us. And what's key about this is it's not about what makes us different, it's what connects us. And that's absolutely imperative to understand. Speaking of what connects us? We believe values are what unite us. That's what connects us. Human values. Now, it's important to understand that there's a continuum of values, right? Not everyone represents every single value, but they absolutely are an imperative to get into a more creative and working environment that's inclusive and culturally resonant. Now listen, like I said, it's a lot of values, right? We represent a degree of human values. Some lean into more than others, right? You have some folks some groups might be more individualistic. Some might be more collectivist. It doesn't matter because we all recognize them because they're on a continuum. Even if I don't necessarily represent those values or lean into those values in certain ways, I understand them because they're inherently human. They connect us. And by the way, there's a ton of them. We're not at a loss of values. Now, if you don't believe that values are really connects us, I'm going to let you sit with this slide for a second. This is arguably probably the best slide I've ever seen. How do these two even get along? If you know the story, they're close. It's a legitimate friendship. It's a partnership. But it's based on shared values around food, right? Around what food brings, how it brings people together, how it lets you create, it lets you commune with one another, it lets you get to know one another. That's how they connected. And if you ask Snoop, there's actually something aspirational about Martha. He's like, you know what? The way that she sees food, the way that she cooks and creates with it is something I want to attain myself. It's that connective tissue, right? They have other connective tissue. We won't talk about the smoking, but that's, you get it. But point is, that's what values do. They bring us together. We need to consider that when we're doing our work. Now at FCB, we actually, I said, you have to be intentional about this. You can't just kind of wish on a star and consider, what happened? Oh, there we go. Is it glitching? There we go. Oh, too much smoothness on that for one slide. But the point is, you have to be intentional about it. You can't just kind of hope that this happens and say, you know, we're going to be inclusive, let's make it happen. At FCB, we started to develop tools, processes, protocols to ensure we're doing this in a repeatable way. Something we developed we call the cultural influence model, which is based on the fact that, listen, if you want to move your core target or your consumer, it's not necessarily about talking at them and representing them as they are. It's about looking where they aspire to be. What are those values that they might want to intersect with in a real provocative way? At the bottom, you start with a mass audience. That's basically anyone in the category. But then you get further up, target audience. That's who the client says, you know, listen, we're targeting like women 25 to 34 who do X, Y, Z. Really pointed demographically at that target. But then we move up and say, listen, we unpack that beyond just demographics. What are their values? What are their behaviors? What are their aspirations? Which helps us get, that's so weird, helps us get to the top of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid is what we call the cultural influence, right? That's the group, the subculture, the trend that's actually aspirational to that middle target, right? They represent those values that this middle target wants to get. I'll tell you a really easy story. Nike. You guys all know Nike, right? Who's Nike's core target? Nike's core target in the middle, who's buying most Nike stuff? Teenage white boys. It's true. Aside from team deals and all stuff, it's teenage white boys. How many teenage white boys do you see in their work? Ooh, you don't see them. You know why? Because they're not trying to reflect back to teenage white boys, because they know they aspire to something else. They aspire to those values that LeBron, right, Cap, Serena represent in this idea of sports and what they get in this idea of just doing it. Because we don't want to just get mirrored back what we are and who we are. There's an aspiration about what we want to get to. They tap in that in a nice way. This helps you get to that. And also, the point is, influence comes from subcultures down, not from the masses up. That's key, right? From the fringes, from the marginalized. That's where cultural influence comes from. Think about that slide I showed you. Movies, cinema, right? It's from the marginalized. It's from the underrepresented. They're influencing culture. Let me show you how this works. You remember this. So GLAAD came to us with an interesting problem. They said, listen, FCB, we have this new product innovation. We have this pink trash bag that smells like flowers. Go, make something fun. Okay, well, trash bags aren't necessarily the most interesting, right? Pretty low involvement category, but like, you know what, that's interesting. Let's take a peek at this and throw the CIM or cultural influence model out and see if we can do something a little bit more compelling. So what do? Well, we unpacked it. Obviously, mass audience here is adult plastic trash bag buyers. That's pretty much everyone, right? Moving up the ladder. Females, mid-30s, but like I said, we go beyond demographics. We go into who are they? What do they value? What are they about? Well, we found that they valued, the ones that we looked at valued self-expression and creativity. Okay, it's getting a little bit more interesting because if we think about the trash bag and the proposition and the promise of this trash bag, there's something very creative about it. Okay, let's see what kind of influence might make sense. Top of the pyramid, we found that Hispanic and Black artists that are extra. Is it aspirational? You guys are laughing. You know the term extra, right? You're so extra versus you're so basic, right? Extra. Who are these Black artists? You mentioned Bad Bunny. You know about Cardi B. We know about Cardi B. That's extra, right? Billy Porter, the list goes on. But the point is, there is a group of folks out there who are living like this. These are aspirational values. They're unapologetically themselves no matter where they go. That's who they're about. Guess what? We got a trash bag that's pink that smells like flowers. That's extra. You see what I'm saying? it has to tie into the values and the proposition that you're trying to get across. This helps you do that. You align with that. And when you do that, you get to work like this.
Strength, desire, ripcord technology. A fragrance this alluring could only belong to a powerful trash bag. With superior strength. The cherry blossom fragrance. It's all fabulous. It's all glad.
Now, what I love about this work is we would never have gotten to that kind of work if we didn't look toward those subcultures, right? For influence, this idea of extra. It's compelling, it's provocative, it's unexpected. We've seen product innovation ads before. You've seen them. They're terrible. They're boring. There's product-led. There's no story. What do we do here? We almost made Glad a badge brand, right? But look at it. I mean, take a peek at everyone from casting to the music, to the contextual situation. Everything about it's extra, but they're bringing everything they are to that situation. Glad, trash bag, right? Getting dressed up. You can even see the casting in there, very diverse, leaning into a lot of different communities, LGBTQ+, black, brown community. Taking it out to the corner, all of a sudden this guy's ashamed of his because, wow, Glad is saying something about me that we might not have said before. That's kind of bad, right? To say, listen, this trash bag says something about me, how I live, how I approach the world, how I see life. You couldn't get to that if you just did the tried and true product innovation work. That's what this approach does, right? Aspirational values. And by the way, in real life, those people don't even live like that, right? It's hyperbolic, we get it. But the values are absolutely aspirational. Who doesn't want to live like that in a certain way? Like, you know what, just the hell with it. I'm just gonna be me. I'm just gonna be extra and go all out there. It's absolutely aspirational, and it's, at the end of the day, fun. Again, that's the example of leaning into values that connect us. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's really about respecting and understanding our differences, leaning into them, not being scared. I think Mary mentioned this idea of being exclusionary. That's interesting because that's something that people, you know, brands kind of get scared of. Like, oh, if we tell really specific, nuanced stories about the black community, or we just show stories about the LGBTQ plus community, we're going to exclude the rest of folks. Well, maybe, but if you tap into values that are absolutely aspirational and human, you don't have to be scared of that, right? Communities, groups, they represent different values in different ways. And that's fine. You don't need to be scared of that. You need to lean into that because that's who we are. So at the end of the day, it's about a necessary mindset shift. This is what we did at the agency. We went from this idea of we can think inclusive. We can think inclusive, that's fine. We know if we get an opportunity, a job, you know, like I said, Black History Month, we have something we want to do some hyper-targeted work toward the Asian community, Hispanic community. We can do that. We have folks. That's missing the boat, right? Because that's exclusion. That's isolation. That's siloing off. We need to move to being this. We're inclusive thinkers. Every time we get an opportunity, a business problem, we need to put that lens on it. Because we know, as we said, values are what connect us. If we understand the differences and lean in those different values that different groups represent, we're gonna get to much better, compelling, and interesting work. And that's it. Thank you. Oh, sure. All right.
I have a couple of questions, and I'm gonna turn it over to you all for questions. But first, let me say, I don't know about y'all, but I do take the trash out looking like that. So you touched on so many things that I touch on in the work that I do here in the classroom and beyond. So I just want to maybe double back on a couple of things. Insights, cultural truths, and what I would call cultural nuance. What's the thread between those three, among those three for you?
Insights, cultural truths, and
then
cultural
cultural
nuance. Oh, that's a good question. The thread. I don't want to be redundant because I know I keep saying there's humanity at the core of them. I think, you know, to me the thread is, from the point of view that we're talking about now, a lot of those come and are born and are really kind of represented in provocative ways through different groups, different cultures. I think as a strategist, the first thing when you look through insights, we all kind of have our way of mining insights. We kind of go to our tried and true kind of resources and things of that nature. But we tend to not look toward places that don't seem familiar or comfortable with us, right? Because we're kind of almost perpetuating how we piece things together. The problem with that, so our insights are almost sometimes biased on how we want that insight to ultimately be, because we have a kind of a pathological way of going about it. So I think that understanding that insights at their core are human, but to get to something that's unique and different, and especially in my business, listen, there's a lot of different syndicated resources that give you a lot of different of the same data and the same stuff, and it's like, okay, cool, what are we gonna get to that's different? I think we need to start to break our rhythms and say, listen, to find true insights, to get to that nuance, and that's what I'm saying, get into nuance. We can't be afraid to lean into nuance that we might not be familiar with, and might not be trying to guide where we're going to. So to me, it's about this idea of kind of leaving a comfort zone of how to get your information, how to apply it, because I think we all do that just naturally. But as a strategist, and as we teach our strategists, look under rocks you haven't looked under. Make yourself uncomfortable. Go to a part of town you've never been to before. Because when you're looking for insights and you're mining for that, nuance is going to get you there. And if you go to the nuance, you go to something that's really specific, that might seem exclusionary, it might seem too inside baseball. If you unpack it, ultimately, hopefully, most of the time, you're going to get to something that's more universal in just a more unique way and a universal kind of human insight. But coming at it from a nuanced perspective will give you something a little bit more novel and it's something more interesting and provocative for someone like that.
So interesting that you say that. I had a question here. Maybe we'll get to this. Maybe I'll sort of rethinking the question here on the fly based on what you just said. So it's almost, so is this question around, do we zoom in or do we zoom out when we are trying to think about this space? And where I'm coming from is, I started my career in this space at Burrell Communications. And before every client creative presentation, Tom Burrell would ask the team, what's Black about it? That's just how important the focus on Black consumer insights was. Before we took work to the client, we had to tell him what's Black about the work that we were taking. But now there seems to be this, is it a rebalance? Is it a shift? Is it a, how do we tell those consumer experiences? How do we deliver on that while also, thinking about the broader landscape, the broader lens? You mentioned general market. We don't want to exclude people. So, but I guess what I'm hearing you say is it's zoom in. And by zooming in, you
zoom in, because I think what's even more prevalent now, what I showed up there was what's Black about it is what more often than not now is what's attractive to the masses. Meaning, if that's where culture is coming from the fringes, from the POCs, from Black and brown, that you don't have to be scared to go extra nuance. Like I've seen work out there. If you've seen the Beats work that came out last year, it's very nuanced. It's very specific. But if you look at what's going on in culture, people are starting to lean on that and starting to dig into there. So you don't feel like if you're being too quote unquote Black with your insights or your nuance, more often than not, that's going to be picked up in culture. And people are going to start to lean into that and want that in certain ways, even though they might not even know everything about it. And that's what's so great about nuance. It's kind of akin to a Pixar movie to me. I like to use that example sometimes. If you go to a Pixar movie, which is so brilliant about, you can go with your 5-year-old, you can go with your wife, you can go with your mom or your grandparent, and you're all going to be sitting there and you're all going to be laughing at things in different ways. Because what they do is they layer it. And there's nuance in the work. So, right, my kid is laughing at stuff, and I'm like, what? And then there's some kind of innuendo. Sometimes it's like sexual innuendo. I'm like, what? And so we're laughing. But you're like, wow. It's interesting because it's so brilliant how they do that, but they're not scared to lean into it. Because the core of it, we're going to get that core message. Different audiences are going to get something different from it, and that's fine, and that's absolutely fine. So that's what we tell, our client partners, say, listen, don't be scared to tell a very unique Black story or story in the queer community. That's fine, because if you really do it the right way and you get to that kind of core value or insight, then people are going to get different things from it. But if it ties to your product or your brand promise in a way that's relevant and connects, then that's fine too.
And you all have a way to actually gauge this, to measure this with clients.
We do. We actually developed something we call the Upstream Inclusion Index, because we're getting this question from clients, like, does it matter if you're inclusive? And how do you even measure inclusivity? And the biggest thing is, are we going to be too kind of exclusionary by being too inclusive? So this tool really takes principles from organizational psychology around cultural competency. I know people were talking about that earlier. And we kind of tailor that to marketing terms. So we put work out there, and it's self-reported data, but the point is, you'll put some work out that will tell a story, like in a Black community, we'll say, for instance. And they say, okay, so how did this do with Black millennial parents? Really well. Okay, how does this do with millennial parents? How does it do with parents? And we're able to kind of track the impact and the effect it has from, we'll call it the halo effect, to ensure that, wow, you know what, we did this the right way, because even if you're not necessarily that core target, it's not excluding you to ensure that you're still in. So we have a tool to help measure the inclusivity of the work in that regard. So it's a relatively new tool. Yeah.
I can see how clients and would be super interested in that,
Absolutely.
that metric, for sure. I have a couple more questions
Sure.
for you to wrap up our time here, and then I'll throw it out to you all for some questions. So where is this space headed? Culture, inclusion, impact, marketing, all the work you just talked about, where are we going?
That's a good question.
Loaded question.
It's a good question. I hope forward. What I will say is, at this point, it's funny because where I sit in our agency, we're like, God, this seems obvious, because we're kind of isolated in that way. We're in our four walls. We're like, this seems obvious. Every time I talk to a client, every time we're in a new business pitch, just like their mind's blown, like, wow, this is unbelievable. This is so interesting. So at the outset, it seems like it's something, wow, they're really into. Problem is, there's still a lot of fear. And there's still a lot of hesitation with, like we were saying, like, I don't know if I still want to have my multicultural agency and do this work and that work and just leave general market here, because that's just their knee-jerk reaction. If we start showing the business case and we start to show, using the UI index, using just, sales data to show, wow, you know what, this is actually moving on, then we think we're going to keep the momentum. We have varying degrees of clients adopting this. At the face of it, everyone's like, this is great, because it's not cool to say this isn't. No one's gonna be like, oh, inclusivity, no. No one's gonna say that. But, so to answer your question, I think more and more clients are starting to adopt it, but you have to start to seed it and kind of, in certain situations, kind of creep in there a little bit and not kind of be too, we'll call it radical, in their minds.
Because the fear, from where I sit, the fear is validated. We've had some very big brands that we all know and love in the headlines over the past few months who have been inclusive and then been in the headlines for a misstep there. So it's real.
Yeah, no, it's real, and we've had this conversation. You might be talking about like Bud Light, and yes, absolutely. We've had this conversation with clients because they want to know, should we not? Our answer is always going to say yes, ... but, because you need to understand why you're getting to that conversation. Because a lot of times, where we find that they're trying to draft off a trend or something that's easy, that doesn't necessarily connect to their DNA and position of who they are. And they're trying to kind of jump on this horse, right? So without doing that, and also not knowing the values of your core constituents and really understanding how they're gonna react, that's where you can start to misstep. So the blanket answer is yes, you should. It's just, how do you do it? And a lot of times you need to walk before you run. And so, if you're gonna start talking about certain communities, you're gonna start reaching certain communities, do some work on the grassroots level. Do something, but you can't just sometimes just jump in the deep end and think everyone's going to come with you. And I think, in Bud Light, we'll call it who it is, I know, that's an interesting situation because they had done some stuff in the community before. So it was almost hard to forecast that. But one of the things we think that the misstep was the fact that, well, there's two things. They didn't stay the course. They didn't back it up, but then they didn't really do the work to understand the headwinds from their core consumers that were working against them. And also, it's there's a lot of factors that go in, but you need to do your work beforehand. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Same question that Mary answered, but now your turn. To our graduates in the room, our early career marketers, what do you expect from them early in their career?
Oh, expect? Oh, God. I mean, to your answer, to your question about is this, where are we going with this? It's absolutely imperative that, the next generation folks stay this course and do not let up. That would be my expectation, is to kind of keep those values and the point of view about inclusivity and diversity at the forefront of everything you do. What I will say is, as much as, some of the kind of old school we'll call marketers, and they need to acquiesce to the new folks coming. It's a fact. You have a lot of power. You have a lot of influence. Don't forget that. Because that's where we're heading. That's where we're heading as a society, but even as marketers, we know that in order to reach our consumers, in order to resonate and connect, we need to change. And so what I'd say is have that voice, be strident in voicing your point of view, because it's absolutely necessary. And having that point of view when you walk in the room is half the battle. So that would be what I would expect, is that.
Awesome. We have time for a couple of questions. Does anyone have a question for Mark? Yes. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
How does it work? How does
It's
index work?
It's part of the set, like the data set. It's very diverse. So we make sure that we have representation from various groups. The point is, most of the work isn't necessarily targeted toward one group, so we want to make sure we're going to get more of a broad representation from many groups. But we're able to cut the data by group for sure. But the fact that we don't necessarily, as an agency, except sometimes with our Hispanic work from a language standpoint, we believe in just doing more diverse mass work. So we want representative samples, but we rarely just say, okay, we're just going to get this group or that group. But they're absolutely representation across, and not only just race and ethnicity, I need to say. We look at household dynamic, we look at ability status, we look at age. But yeah, we do make sure we try to be representative.
All right. One more question? Yeah, go ahead. It's loud.
Hi, I wanted to understand when you actually go through the CIM, do you typically rethink the target audience, do you add to it, or do you create a new one? Because that may also depend on the products you're trying to market or the campaigns you're trying to go about. So I just wanted to understand.
How do you think about the target audience with the CIM?
Well, typically, it's what's given to us, to be quite honest. It's what the brand or client says, listen, this is who we want to talk to. So that's pretty fixed, but what we try to do is push them, and a lot of clients are starting to follow suit, to give us briefs or briefings that aren't demographically based, because we want to get that kind of seated in how their marketing team's starting to brief us. So instead of saying, hey, white female 25 to 34, we want them to do some of the work that we do. Like, actually tell us more about behaviors, attitudes, other contextual givens that can help us really get to the core. So, and so to answer your question, it's a fixed target from our client, kind of delegates that, but we want them to take a look at them differently and start, because when we come back with that work, we all kind of need to be singing from that same hymnal, like, oh, okay, so, right, before it's just, we want this, it's like, no, we actually need to go a little deeper. So that's really how we're trying to educate and move to getting more sophisticated, more inclusive briefings, but client briefs to us.
That's what I was curious about, because they usually have target audience that they give to agencies.
Yeah, oh, for sure, they do. And our point of view is how to approach that. And like I said before, demographics, I'm not trying to throw them out because they are important to a degree, but they only tell a part of the story. And so if they're just trying to move on a demographic basis, then they're missing the mark. And that's part of a lot of even the onboardings with new business. And so we're really clear about our point of view. It's hard with some of them. I mean, honestly, it's a move at a glacial pace, but we're making some inroads with some of our clients that we've had for several years, so.
That's good. And so I'll tell you what you told us, stay the course.
Stay the course, stay the course. I think that's it, that's it.
For sure. Thank you, Mark,
Sure,
so
for
much. I
sure.
really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was wonderful. Thank you. I think Vijay said at the top of the hour we were going to have an engaging, informative, illustrative evening, and you folks certainly delivered on that. Same was true of Alyssa and Mary. We're so happy to have them here sharing their insights with us today, and happy to have all of you here today. To my colleagues, Danielle, Jacqueline, thank you so much for putting together this amazing evening. IMC Live is always one of my favorite favorite events of the fall quarter. You've delivered once again on a really wonderful program. Yeah. And thanks to all of you. I know we're about to hit finals time, so I know the stress level is high, but thank you for coming out and being with us this evening. We have a reception, so there's still some more time to gather and talk, process what you've heard this evening. Enjoy the refreshments, and thank you for being with us. Take care.